Indeed, thank you for staying with us here on KTN Business Today, here on KTN News. And before we took a break, we were talking about the TICAD conference and technology transfer. My name is Peter Akaba, and we want to continue that discussion right now with my two guests in studio. Mike Rabahi is CEO of Homeboys, and of course, Kelvin Muduri, he is CEO of Urithi Sacco. Kevin, before we went on the break, the fact that Asian tigers, Japan and others seem to be planning for the future in a really big way, yet we as Africans, indeed, the problem with most African capitals, the most glaring thing even, is this, so to say, the unplanned state. Where is the gap?
Thank you. One of the challenges that we are having is this is where these nations are beating us.
Yes.
We've not really been able to embrace the importance of planning, even as a nation. And when it comes to certain things like that, it is a policy issue and the government needs to come in. But one of the challenges we've seen is there is a lot of rigidity, especially in the African government, in our nation and such, whereby we are not open to certain ideas, to certain models of planning and all that. But I think it is a high time now. The government even brings on board even the private mindset, so that we can think together and ask ourselves, what is the future of our nation?
So how much does this rigidity, indeed lack of planning, and so to say the sort of fallout that results from this state of affairs cost your members in terms of expense and inconvenience?
What happens is, and we've seen this even in various parts of the country, you go somewhere, you develop some property, then within no time the government comes and says that you cannot develop here, or even maybe even if you develop, you're going to refund you. And you know, even the process of refund with the government, it will take years and all that. But when we have good plans, not only at the national government, but also even with the county government, it means from the onset for the next 100 years or so, people will know where to live, people will know where the industry should be set up and all that, so that we take advantage. When you look at even certain countries, you realize they have planned in such a way that if you need farming, there are specific areas. If you need residential areas, there are specific areas, which helps the nation even achieve more, even in terms of development.
We are also not planning and indeed building for the lower end of the market, a thing which countries like Japan have been able to do in a very big way. And if you do put up your property, like you're saying, in an area of the country, and then some slamification of the environment occurs, you lose value.
Yes.
And these are things that people are facing every day. What do we do to resolve this sorts of situation going forward?
As I said, different players needs to come on board.
Yes.
The government, the private sector, the various users at the end of the day. And we ask ourselves, what is it that we need to do? Then we provide even a good plan for our various cities, for our various parts of the country, so that if we go to construct in a certain area, we are sure that this is the place that has been set aside. Then a lot of education also needs to be done, not only from the top, not only from the government, but also even to every person in this nation, whereby we embrace them on the we educate them on the importance of technology. We show them why we need to plan for our cities. We show them why we also need to even embrace technology in the construction, even for the low end. And if you look at even the various gaps that we have when it comes to housing, at the moment we have over 1 million houses that are required within the nation. But if we don't have a plan, you find people just building wherever that they want to build, and at the end of the day, the slums you're talking about are going to come up. But the moment we come together, we bring our minds together, we take advantage of technology. The various officers in the government offices also need also to embrace change, so that we can take advantage of such. I believe we'll be headed in the right direction.
So Mike, this sounds to me like opportunity talking for all the youth who are either jobless or looking to grow in some sort of industry in this nation. And with opportunities such as these available and opportunities for technology transfer and indeed learnings that organizations such as yours are creating, what do you think is the best way forward to be able to sort of pair this together?
I think one key thing we need to do is generate interest in that space.
Yes.
There's a notion that it's somebody else's responsibility. So the young people tend to take a back seat and believe that it's not a space they'd like to really engage in. But if we show them that there's actually a way to encourage and to appreciate the effort they put towards helping design some of these spaces, you'll see a great uptake. So we then realize that a lot of public information has to go out saying that there's room for us, we're looking for new ideas, we're looking for new thinking, new age thinking, we want to design spaces that can accommodate the new trend of commuters or dwellers. The kind of demands are changing every day. Your house you live when you're born is not the same kind of space you need now because the demands.
I want you to cut you off right there and ask, you're a media player, and the fact that a lot of the things we're talking about right now involve first consumer education.
Yes.
Creating a groundswell of interest such that when players do come in, it's economically viable because you're dealing in multiple units. He said 1 million homes need to be made. When we start saying that we want to enable the youth actually grow from startups, from ideas and grow into businesses, how are we going to knit this ecosystem together?
I think you've obviously opened another new kind of one that is of high interest to us. We're very keen in supporting and mentoring young businesses.
Yes.
And there's a big inclination to move these businesses to actually focus on designing and creating opportunities that will help actually appease and ease a growing populace. So when we look at the kind of areas we're trying to actually focus on, a lot of it is skewed towards public services, where we're trying to get innovative ways of supporting or bringing to life new ideas that will help things like traffic control, food access, accommodation, access to information. Basically
improving the quality of life.
Exactly. So again, technology right now is a very exciting space to be in, because there's nothing you can't do with it. Everything dwells around tech, be it what you eat, where you sleep, how you commute, what you wear. So we find that within the hubs, we're really trying to encourage the young ones to come in there and look at the various challenges you'd face. Like you said, right now, we're obviously a shortage of accommodation. And when you look at what's happening in the West, where there are things like Airbnb, where people are sharing accommodation, and look at what's happening with transport, where you're trying to maximize the use of space you have. I mean, there's even ideas where people can share and farms, where you go in there, get a quarter of acre, plant, and when your time is done, somebody else takes it up. So we're trying to use that kind of, the way of trying to use the resources available to kind of extend and this whole thing of sharing is what's happening now, but how do you manage that process? So that's where technology comes in, to marry those are the need and those are the want, and get to a space where it's very easy to access some of this information and say, fine, there's a space available here, this kind of space, what can fit inside it, design this for me.
Okay, interesting conversation, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us, Mike Rava of Homeboys and Kelvin Morethi of Urithi Sacco. It has indeed been a very interesting discussion. We, of course, want to take this conversation forward. I hope to have you again after the conference so we can see just exactly what has been achieved. Indeed, thank you. We want to move on, but stay with the conversation around Japan and TICAD. And this time we want to go a bit more relaxed and tell you that sake is a drink produced by a brewing process. The fact that much like that of beer, the brewing process for sake, however, differs from the process for beer in that for beer, the conversion from starch to sugar and from sugar to alcohol occurs in two discrete steps. When sake is brewed, however, these conversions occur simultaneously. Let's now just see where this drink comes from.
Sake. Japan's traditional alcoholic beverage is made from rice and crystal clear water. Sake is served at many different events and banquets in Japan. It also plays an important role in bringing people together. Today we explore the world of sake and the traditional way in which it is brewed. About 700 million litres of sake is consumed each year. That represents almost 7 litres for every Japanese adult. In ancient Japan, sake was considered a sacred drink, and it was offered to the deities. Rituals like this continue to the present day. On festive occasions, it's traditional to break open a cask of sake, beating on the lid with wooden mallets. Because the lid of the sake cask is round, it represents harmony, and the act of opening the cask symbolizes the spreading of good fortune. The sake is served to everyone present, so that they can share in this felicitous moment. Every year in spring, a national sake tasting competition is held. Selected from throughout the country, Each sake is evaluated on its aroma, flavour and other qualities. There are around 1,800 breweries in Japan, between them making more than 15,000 different products. Each part of Japan emphasises its own regional differences, and there is a growing appreciation of distinctive local sake varieties. Sake is an alcoholic beverage brewed through a fermentation process. The primary ingredient is rice, the staple grain of Japan. Just as with the grapes used to make wine, there are specialized varieties of rice that are used for brewing sake. Let's look at the processes that go into producing sake. The first step in sake making is to polish the rice. Special equipment is used that strips away the outer layers of each rice grain. The more the rice is polished, the purer the flavor of the resulting sake. This gives the sake greater sweetness and fragrance. After being washed, to help it absorb moisture better, the polished rice is then steamed. It's a vital process that will influence the final flavor of the sake. An essential ingredient in the brewing process is the fermentation agent known as koji. Spores of a special mold are sprinkled onto steamed rice. Once inoculated this way, the koji mold starts to grow. After 2 days, the rice is entirely covered by the mold. This is what the koji looks like when it's ready. The starch in the rice has been converted into glucose, which gives the sake its sweetness and richness. The next step is to add a yeast starter to the mash. This kicks off the fermentation process that produces the alcohol. The yeast is also critical in determining the flavor and aroma of the finished sake. After 1 month of fermentation, the alcohol content will rise to as much as 20%. The mash is then filtered through cloth to separate the liquid from the lees. This is pure, undiluted sake. Nowhere else in the world has a traditional fermented beverage been developed that attains such a high level of alcohol. Thanks to the skill, experience and craftsmanship of the brewers, another batch of sake has been created. Premium quality sake has been starting to find fans abroad in recent years. In England, one of the world's most prestigious wine competitions established a new sake division in 2007. Over the past 5 years, British imports of sake have doubled. These days, as the popularity of Japanese cuisine spreads, sake is starting to be embraced by drinkers around the world.
And on that boozy note is where we want to close KTN Business today. Well, do stay with us for subsequent bulletins because, of course, we are staying on top of various developing stories for you. The fact that the TICAD conference now underway here in Nairobi in various places and various world leaders expected to jet in for that. We will, of course, be letting you know who's in town and what they're up to and of course, what transpires at the conference. Coming up after this edition of KTN Business today is yet another news focus. So do stay with us here on KTN News. My name is Peter Akaba and do have yourself a good afternoon.